We have so much to talk about. At New Year yesterday morning, Mika and I went to a New Year's Day service, and the priest gave a beautiful homily, I thought, on the need for all of us to be, as he said, architects of peace in our daily lives, in our political discourse, in our foreign policy, and everything. Because the harsh path we've taken in our, not so new century, it's often elevated revenge over reconciliation. And as he reminded us, for all of us in attendance, and I love this.
Yeah, that's a good one.
He said, when you seek revenge with someone, start by digging 2 graves, one of them for yourselves.
Yeah.
And wow, that really does strike you when you look what's happened in Washington over the past 20 years, because I really do believe, Mika, we live in 2 Americas. One that has seen childhood poverty drop to 60-year lows. It's seen teenage pregnancy drop to 75-year lows. It's seen the U.S. dollar stronger against other world currencies than any time over the last generation. It's seen our U.S. military stronger relative to the rest of the world than any military in the history of humankind. A lot is going on in America that is right. And yet we deal with a political system that continues, it just seems to get more bitter and more corrosive and more unworthy of the great nation that its leaders represent. So I'm just hoping in the new year that leaders in Washington, D.C., they can follow your dad's quote, which you have at the top of your Twitter bio.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Bipartisanship helps to avoid extremes and imbalances. It causes compromises and accommodations. So let's cooperate. And there's no moral equivalency there. We've been very clear about what we believe has happened over the past 6 years. And where most of the blame for that has rested. But let's hope. Let us hope we can move forward in the coming year. And maybe our leaders will start doing what Americans do want them to do. They want them to work together and, like your dad said, cooperate with each other.
And in the very final moments of the last year, democracy prevailed. It survived.
Yes.
And, there was a question. So there's a lot to be hopeful for as well.
There really is. And Michael Beschloss, let me bring you in there. We really never got a sort of year-end wrap-up where we talked about democracy. But you see what happened New Year's Eve and New Year's Day in Ukraine. People cheering in Kyiv for those fighting for their freedom. Just remarkable. And my gosh, every American should be able to celebrate that loves this country, that loves the U.S. Constitution, that loves American democracy, that all the election deniers, all the people that wanted to say we won't recognize election outcomes unless our side wins, they all lost. 2022, I mean, you have to fight for democracy and freedom every day in whatever way you can. But 2022 gave us a couple of more years where at least the basics of Madisonian democracy remain intact.
Absolutely, totally. And Happy New Year, Mika and Joe and everyone else. Let's celebrate today. We have had ample reason over the last 7 years to say these are dangers for democracy. But this morning, I think we can say that the election of 2022 proved, as I always love to say, and never said louder than last year, no one should ever bet against American democracy. If this election had gone the other way, and I'm not talking about more favorably for Republicans, but let's say in those 5 or 6 key states, election deniers had been elected as governors, secretaries of state, election officials, state legislatures, then what we would be talking about this morning would be the fact that there's a big shadow over the election of 2024, and will our democracy survive? So my point, and again, I'm sorry to keep on nodding, but I subscribe to everything you both are saying this morning, and that is, this is a moment, A, to celebrate what's happened, B, to meditate on the strength of democracy, not only in the United States, but in Ukraine, where people are willing to give up their lives rather than succumb to an authoritarian dictatorship. And, when you were talking about the need to work together and the danger of hatred in the sermon that you both heard on Sunday, it reminded me You remember what Richard Nixon said in his last speech in the East Room of the White House, August 9th, 1974. Others may hate you, but those who hate you don't win unless you hate them, and then you destroy yourself. Nixon said it. He wasn't right about a lot of things, but this he sure was right about. And who should know more than Nixon about how hatred destroys you?
So, David Ignatius, your thoughts on 2022 as we look ahead to 2023?
Well, I share a lot of the optimism that you and Joe were expressing. I think 2022 was a year in which in America, the party of crazy got pounded. Americans decided that they wanted candidates who were closer to the traditional, natural order of our politics. So I think that was a significant result. There's ways in which January 6th seems like a long time ago. We're a different country now in some subtle ways, and I think we should all be grateful for that and grateful for the people at the Justice Department and the Congressional Committee who've investigated January 6th so thoroughly. In the world, I see a lot of positive things, but I do see the values that we cherish in a struggle. In Ukraine, there's a brutal war that does bear comparison to World War I taking place, a war of attrition, nightly pounding of the cities of Ukraine by a truly despotic leader. I think Putin's losing. I think he knows it. I think Zelensky and the Ukrainian people are winning, but there's a lot more I fear bloodshed ahead in that war. China, it's startling to see the failure of Xi's authoritarian policies in dealing with COVID and dealing with the economy. This has been a bad year for Xi Jinping. So many things have gone wrong, and he's having to reverse course. I think his ability to seize Taiwan grows more complicated. Those bode well for freedom. I think so. When which Ukraine reignited the idealism in Europe. When I travel in Germany or France even, I find people just speak about the possibilities, the aspiration for freedom in a way that they wouldn't have 10 years ago. That's great. Germany's on a different course than it was. In Iran, there's a movement that, believe it or not, is actually challenging the power of the mullahs to run the stifling society. Women in Iran have been unbelievably courageous in 2022. And there's every prospect that movement will continue. But the point I'd make, I guess, is that this is in the balance. These are fights that are continuing. The good guys are being incredibly brave, but they could lose.